Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining. We're going to get our webinar started here. My name is Travis Durick. I'm a product manager at Peplink, and today we're going to talk about all the cool new things in router firmware 8.0.1, which was released just a couple weeks ago, and InControl version 2.8.2. There's all kinds of new stuff in both of these, so excited to show you guys what's some of my favorites are. So first up, we're going to talk about router firmware 8.0.1. Again, this was just released about 2 weeks ago. I think we're kind of underselling it by calling it a 0.1 release, but I don't get to choose the version numbers on the firmware. So I'll just dive in and show you what I think is so great about it and why it might be a little bit bigger than a 0.1 release. So first up is our layer 7 DPI. So we've done a couple things in this version 8.0.1. Number one, we've expanded the application signatures. We've just about doubled them. So there's all kinds of new applications on our QoS and filtering lists. We've also synchronized all those lists into all the different places in the router that you use them. So that same DPI engine is running our layer 7 firewall capabilities, and it's also the same engine running our QoS capabilities. So there's a few different places where you'll see these new applications show up. Speaking of those new applications, lots of popular ones like YouTube, Netflix, WhatsApp, Google Drive, OneDrive, all these really popular cloud applications that all of our customers are using already. And so here's just a quick little glimpse of what the difference is between the number of applications supported in our DPI signatures. On the left, we've got the 8.0.0 list from the layer 7 firewall. So you can see, like, if we look at that first category, audio video streaming, there's a handful of, maybe 2 handfuls worth of services in there. If you look on the right-hand side, that's the 8.0.1 list. You can see just that real-time streaming audio video list is pretty much doubled. You see much more popular applications like Netflix, Pandora, YouTube listed in there now as well. So again, lots of relevant applications have been added to the DPI signatures. We only had enough real estate on one screen to show you the 2 lists. The lists go on both of them, but again, I encourage you to dive into those and just see how many new applications there are in there. And the good news is we're not done there. We know there's lots more applications that you folks want to see added that are important to your customers. And so after this webinar is done, we're going to send out a survey for you guys to help weigh in on what other applications you guys want to see show up in our DPI signatures. So definitely not done here, but wanted to show you all the great enhancements that have happened already. So another huge feature, this is applying to the FusionHub, is we've supported layer 2 speed fusion in FusionHub now in 8.0.1. This is something that customers have been asking for a long time, and it's not that we haven't been listening, but it's complicated to do in the FusionHub world. But nonetheless, 8.0.1, we finally delivered on that, and it's pretty incredible how they've implemented this. If you guys remember, in firmware 8.0.0, we introduced VRFs in FusionHub, which are separate isolated routing functions that allows you to have different customers with overlapping subnets on the same FusionHub. Well, now with layer 2 support in FusionHub, you can have a unique layer 2 environment in each VRF. So you could have 5 different completely isolated layer 2 environments. So you can have multiple customers in the same FusionHub, each with their own private layer 2 and layer 3 speed fusion environments. So this really opens up a lot of options for what you can do with a single FusionHub in terms of multi-tenancy and all kinds of unique networking combinations that you can build now easily from FusionHub. So I'll show you how to get to those settings here in the router GUI. In this screenshot, we've got the speed fusion page of a FusionHub. So configuring this is a little different than configuring layer 2 speed fusion on the router side. Normally on the router side, you have to go to the LAN interface and set a VLAN to be a layer 2 speed fusion profile. In the FusionHub world, you go to the bottom of that speed fusion page where you see the PEP-VPN settings. You click on that question mark there, and you'll see there's an option to define a layer 2 bridging PEP-VPN. So when you click on that link inside of there, you see this new menu show up at the bottom. And this lets you select the different profiles that you've got in your FusionHub. So if you've got 3 different profiles for 3 different locations, you can add each of those to the drop down here. Just select them one at a time and click the plus, and then it will effectively bridge all 3 of those profiles. So you can choose which profiles to bridge, and you can also optionally bridge them to the LAN interface of your FusionHub. So if you've got an application that lives in the cloud in the same LAN segment as your FusionHub, you can bridge those remote peers to whatever applications are on that LAN segment in your FusionHub as well. Again, just gives you lots of flexibility. Next up is a popular security feature that people have been asking for a long time, and that's country-based firewalls and outbound policies, so that you can control which countries traffic can come in from, traffic can go out to, or you could steer traffic destined for a certain country down a certain WAN. If you live in an area where certain providers are better at terminating traffic to this region or that region, you've got the ability to control that with outbound policies. And again, firewalls, you can control kind of who you can talk to and what parts of the world. This is all managed with IC2, so you're not going to see these features directly in the router GUI. You're going to have to go into IC2 and manage the firewall and outbound policies there. We'll show you some of those screenshots a little bit later when we talk about the IC2 side of that feature. So another one that's been talked about for a while and it's been slowly rolling out is fast roaming support or seamless roaming on Wi-Fi. So this first started with the access point firmware 3.6.0. Recently, there's a new firmware 3.6.1, which adds support for a couple different seamless roaming extensions of 802.11. So we're now supporting 802.11K, R, and V. Those are all roaming related extensions of 802.11. So that's all supported now in that AP firmware 3.6.1. And then in the router firmware 8.0.1, you're able to configure that from the AP controller. So you can push that out and scale from the AP controller now in 8.0.1. So if we look at that from the AP controller side, you can see here we're setting up a WPA2 personal network. We've populated a shared key, and then we've checked this fast transition box. Previously, in the older 3.6.0, we only supported 802.11R roaming extension, but again, now in 3.6.1, we're supporting R, K, and V. So very much on par with what a lot of the other enterprise Wi-Fi vendors support in terms of seamless roaming capabilities. Another cool feature in 8.0.1 is scheduled SIM switching. So now you've got the ability to choose based on a calendar date and time when you want to switch between SIM A and SIM B in a router. There's lots of different motivations for doing this. Sometimes you've got data plans that you need to make sure that you've got usage in every month. Sometimes you need to make sure that you're not using a SIM card too long in every month. There's lots of different business reasons and data plan reasons why you might want to do this, but nonetheless, that's a new feature in 8.0.1. So here you can see in one of our cellular interfaces, there's the usual suspects that you normally get to choose between SIM A and SIM B, but now we've got this alternate periodically between SIM A and B. And so when you choose that button, you can see it gives you a time and a date of the month that you can set that SIM switch to happen. So again, really nice, simple feature, but for some customers, it's a really big deal. So the last feature I'm going to talk about in 8.0.1 is more of a bug fix, not as fun of an item to talk about, but nonetheless, there was a bug in 7.1.1 and 8.0.0 that would degrade the SpeedFusion bonding performance more often when cellular links were in play. But regardless, in 8.0.1, we've squashed that bug. So anybody doing cellular bonding, we highly encourage you to upgrade all of your endpoints to 8.0.1. So that would apply to FusionHub and the routers themselves. To avoid that bonding performance bug, you'll want to get every end of that SpeedFusion network up on 8.0.1 as soon as possible. Okay, with that, we'll dive into all the new cool features in InControl 2.8.2. IC2 2.8.2 has been out for about a month now, so a little bit longer than 8.0.1 firmware. But nonetheless, we want to get you guys familiar with all those changes that showed up in there. So the first big one in IC2 2.8.2 is the firewall management features. We've had firewall management capabilities in IC2 for about a year, but in 2.8.2, we've made it a lot more flexible and easy to administer from the cloud. Previously, you had to upload a firewall config that was kicked out of a router. And if you wanted to update that, you had to go reconfigure it in the router and then re-upload that file. Well, now you can start from scratch and build your firewall policies directly in IC2. You can still upload a config from a router if you've got a template that you want to start with, but now you can edit that directly in IC2 as well. So you can add rules, change the order of them, edit them. You've got all the flexibility to manage those rules directly from IC2 now. So a lot more easier to administer day to day. Here you can see an example of that country or region blocking that we talked about earlier as well. Here we've set up an inbound firewall rule that I'm saying is to allow North American traffic. So I've said allow any traffic from a region being the United States or Canada. And again, I'm going to allow that traffic. My default firewall policy would be to deny. So effectively, I'm only allowing traffic that's originating from the US or Canada to come into my network. So again, you can do this on the firewall policies or the outbound policies. You can use this region blocking capability now. So talking about outbound policies in IC2, this gets a similar update to what the firewall policies did. Again, before you had to upload a config file that had your outbound policies in it, and you didn't have a lot of ability to modify those on the fly after you'd uploaded it. So those changes have been extended to the outbound policy manager as well. And again, here you can see on the left, we've got a few of the different options that are showing up in the destination or source view now. So again, you've got that region capability for the country blocking. There's also a new one called SaaS, software as a service. And so what this is doing, this is giving you first packet inspection on right now, originally just 2 services that are popular. So we've got all the Google G Suite services in there, and then we've got all the Microsoft Office 365 and Azure services in there. So if you've got traffic that you know is destined for one of those 2 services, you can quickly identify that here using that SaaS destination and then choosing G Suite or the Microsoft Office 365 traffic as well. So that's another popular feature that's going to be expanded on as we get more feedback from you guys on what applications you want those first packet definitions for. But again, we've got those rolled out now in 8.0.1 to start playing with and learn how to take advantage of that capability. Another new feature in IC2 is one that's been in the router GUI for a little while now, and that's called group networks. In 8.0.0, we added this feature into the router firmware so that you could add a list of several different IP addresses or subnets and create that into what's called a group network so that you could use that grouped network in your outbound policies and your firewall rules. So you've only got to go to one place to manage that list of IPs. So let's say you have 10 different offices, each with a firewall. And so you can put a whole list of all of those offices' firewalls and IP addresses in this group network list. And then you can create really simple policies so you can whitelist any traffic coming from your other offices automatically. So again, you've got one list to maintain instead of having to go to every single router at every location and update if an IP changes or you add an office here or there. You can really quickly manage those lists of networks or IPs at scale. Another big update on IC2 is the SpeedFusion configurator. There's been a few different fine-tuning settings in the SpeedFusion router GUI that haven't shown up in IC2 yet. And so now 2.8.2 is exposing a lot of those extra settings. So that includes latency difference cutoff, suspension time after packet loss. These are all kind of nitty-gritty SpeedFusion settings that are used to optimize performance depending on your WAN length. So bonding cellular is one area where these finer tuning settings can really impact your performance in a big way. Other highlights here that have been added to the SpeedFusion configurator, layer 2 SpeedFusion configuration is now supported here. And we've also added support for forward error correction. So we're getting much closer to parity on the IC2 settings versus the router GUI settings, so that you can use all these powerful new updates to SpeedFusion with the ease of management of IC2. So earlier we talked about the seamless roaming or fast transition option in the new AP firmware. And that also has been added to the InControl side. So now if you've got InControl managed SSIDs, you can quickly enable that fast transition or seamless roaming and push that out to all of your different routers out there, so that you can enable that feature whether you're using the AP controller or IC2 to manage those SSID networks. Another cool one is an update to a feature that I think most people didn't know was there in the first place, and so I really wanted to highlight this one. Previously, IC2 allowed you to add a substring with the wildcard #### or #####, and that would add the last 4 digits of the router's serial number to whatever SSID you configured. So a lot of times service providers like to do this so that they can provide a similar but unique SSID to all of their different customers' routers. The update in IC2 2.8.2 is you can put that wildcard substring in anywhere in the SSID. Previously, it had to be on the end. Now you can put it anywhere. Additionally, you can randomize the shared key for these SSIDs that you have. So you can really quickly, at large scale, create nice, unique service provider style SSIDs for all of your customers, so that they've got nice, secure, common sense access to their SSID, their Wi-Fi networks. So one more service that I wanted to show you guys, this one actually didn't get an update in 2.8.2, but it's one that's kind of surrounded by a lot of mystery sometimes. It might not have the most intuitive name. That's our Find My Peplink service. So what this is this is a dynamic DNS service. So it allows you to create a host name for any of your routers, so that you can very quickly find that using a common sense host name instead of remembering a whole bunch of IP addresses. This is super useful for SpeedFusion. So if you've got a SpeedFusion router with public IPs that might be dynamic, you can give them a Find My Peplink address and use those when you're building your SpeedFusion profiles, instead of having to find the IPs and update it if it changes. IC2 will do all that automatically for you. To get into that, you have to go to the device level, click on the edit link right under the device name. And when you do that, you'll see a bunch of options show up. Just below the map there, you'll see Find My Peplink service. You turn that on, and then you can give it whatever hostname prefix you want. Just make sure you save that at the bottom, and as soon as that's done, you should be able to ping that hostname that you've got and start using that dynamic DNS service. There's no extra cost to it. It's just part of your IC2 subscription, so definitely encourage you guys to take advantage of that feature. Another feature that's been in IC2 for a few versions, but got a subtle update here, but nonetheless is a super powerful one that I want to make sure you guys are aware of, is our SIM card reports. So previously, this was labeled as SIM pool reports, but what it does is it lets you create reports at the organization level for all of your groups, or at the group level, or both. But what it does is we automatically track the carrier for each SIM card in all of your equipment. And we allow you to build reports based on that. So you can, by default, look at all the usage for each carrier, look at how many SIM cards you have. You can set your billing start days if you want. You can send pooled alerts, so that if you're going over whatever your data plan might be, you can get an alert on that. And then you can also create custom pools. So you can create a custom pool for customers that might have SIM cards from 4 different carriers that you're creating a unique data plan for. You can put those custom pools in there and also build on those alerting reports for that. So again, very powerful feature. Just go in there and explore it. It's under the reports tab. Again, it's at the group level, it's at the organization level. So you can set it at each different level for whatever internal or external purpose you're trying to report on. So the last feature in IC2 that I want to talk about is a fairly subtle one, but again, really powerful when you're managing networks at scale. So our cellular products, the Max routers, have cellular LTE modules inside of them, and those modules have their own module level firmware separate from the router firmware that we produce. And not very often, but from time to time, there can be bugs in that module firmware, or the network carrier might have an update that they require a newer module firmware for. And so from time to time, there's a need to upgrade all of your cellular radio modules. And we've got the option in the GUI to do that individually. But again, if you've got 500, 5,000 devices out there, that's not an easy thing to go through and click into each GUI. And so now we've added the ability to do this from IC2. So you can search, you can click that edit button, you can check as many devices as you want to update the firmware on, and then choose that actions drop down and choose to update the cellular module firmware. So again, just another great way to manage your devices at scale for those tasks that might not come up as often as you expect, but when they do come up, they're usually pretty urgent to get done. So that's all I've got for the content. I'll just go through and start reviewing some of the questions. Feel free to submit more questions to me right now as I'm reading through this, and I can answer any questions you've got on these new features. Okay, so the first question I see is asking about the AP1300M to see if that's going to support fast roaming. I'll have to get a specific answer on the fast roaming part, but I do know that there is an updated firmware being worked on for the 300M. It's kind of been the last to get updated as the newer AC and the Wave 2 products have been coming out, but nonetheless, we are actively working on a new firmware version for the 300M. I'll have to go back with engineering and just confirm if the seamless roaming features specifically will make it to that firmware or not. So I see another question about the IC2 only features like the IP groups or the firewall level or the country level firewall rules. So the IP groups are available in the router right now. That's in, I believe, 8.0.0, but definitely in 8.0.1, you can see the group networks feature in there. The country blocking, I don't know if that will show up. There's kind of active maintenance required on those country lists. And so I think that one is going to be harder to actually push down to the router level. Got another question about the country-based routing. I'm looking for more additional information on that. I'll look and see if we've got a FAQ on the forum, and if not, we'll make sure to post one about that feature specifically and how you can use it. I see another question about the DPI list. Can we manage bandwidth per application? So this is something we've heard quite a bit. Like, I want to limit, I don't want to block Netflix, but I want to limit it to 10 megs, no more than 10 megs per second. So that's one example I've heard quite a few times. That's not in 8.0.1, but that is something that engineering has committed to working on. And so I'm not sure if that will make the next firmware version or not, but we were just discussing that capability earlier this week, and they've said that it's definitely possible and they're committed to implementing that. And so I would stay tuned for that. I think there's a good chance we'll see that coming out in the next firmware version, but I'm not 100% sure if it'll make that or not, but definitely being worked on. So the SaaS Office 365, does that include Skype and Team? If it's a Microsoft registered IP address, it certainly should. Microsoft and Google publish their public-facing service IPs, and so we're listening to those published services and automatically updating them as they update those IPs. So I'm not positive if that service is included, but it seems unlikely that Microsoft would exclude those IPs from their globally published IP list. Okay, I see two other questions. Can DPI work per client? I'm not exactly sure what the question is asking there. The DPI identifies the applications being used, so you can prioritize or block those applications. You can create different user groups so that some have different QoS policies. Each group has different QoS policies, or maybe is exempt from some of the application blocking that other clients might be. So hopefully that helps answer your question, but if not, just throw another question into the mix here. Another question on BGP on Speed FusionHub. I'm not positive on that one. That one will definitely depend on where your FusionHub is deployed, like VMware versus a cloud service, but that's something I can definitely follow up on and get an answer for you, David. I see a question on testing of the fast roaming. I'm not sure how engineering tested that, but I know they've implemented those 802.11 fast roaming standards, and so I'm not sure exactly what their testing was, but I can say I was on a long conference call last night at my house, and I definitely roamed between APs, walking from the upstairs to the downstairs a couple times during that call on a Skype call, and I did not have a single drop or skip in audio during those transitions. So from my real world test case, it worked very well in my home. So I see another question about the SAS not showing up in the web GUI. That's another one that we're actively listening to updates from those cloud providers. And so there's a kind of an update component to that. And so that's why those features have been implemented in IC2. I'm not sure if there's an easy way to extend that directly into the router level or not. For now, it's a feature that will live in IC2 only, but definitely open to feedback from you guys as you get in there and use it and get more comfortable with it. Okay, I'll give another minute or so for questions to show up. If not, I think we'll give you guys back a half hour, a little bit shorter webinar than normal today, but I think it should be helpful for you guys to see all these new features and dive in there. And I would definitely encourage you to post questions up in the forum as you start exploring these new features. All right, with that, we'll shut down the webinar for today. Thank you all very much for attending. Look forward to any questions you guys have.